Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 24th of October and we are going to have an interesting show today, largely focused on one investment theme, defense stocks. That's been really building momentum, particularly over the last 18 to 24 months. Now, to shed more light on this, and as our guest today, coming out to us from Sydney, Australia, we have Jessica Amir, market strategist at moomoo. Jess, good afternoon.
Hello, Brian.
Now, Jess, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look and see how markets across the region have performed, in particular, the sharp runoff in cryptocurrencies. Now, we've got Bitcoin, which is now at 34,442. It's up 12.29%. Ethereum is at 1,820. It's up 7.41%. Now, looking across the regional stock markets, we start with the SGX. That's up 0.45%. The KLCI over at Malaysia is down 0.29%. Shanghai is up 0.49%. The ASX All Ordinaries is up 0.21%. The Nikkei is up 0.07%. The Hang Seng is down 0.54%. Rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 0.53%. Jess, your views on market performance in the first half of the day?
Well, I guess mostly things are positive. I mean, just touching on what you talked about at Bitcoin's up about 11% so far in the Asian session. So we're seeing Bitcoin, the closely watched cryptocurrency giant currency, that's over 35K for the first time since 2022. And that's really, Brian, on hopes of a US dollar spot Bitcoin ETF getting approval for the first time. Plus, adding into positive sentiment, we've also got China's sovereign fund that has come out and heavily bought into ETFs. That's boosted sentiment in Asia. And more broadly across the globe, we are seeing a big turnaround in US earnings. So corporate America, they're reporting so far positive earnings releases for the first time in a year. And forward earnings estimates are also expected to see a huge recovery as well. So far so good, but don't be reading too much into one day's move because there's lots of caution in the air and volatility will probably pick up. Of course, we've got US GDP out later, so there's still lots on the line.
Now, Jess, we've been talking about this several times, but today we're going to take a deep dive. It's something that you've talked about a number of times in the show, defense stocks. It's had a run-up, especially after the Ukraine war, but now we've got a second surge in defense stocks. Walk us through some of the interesting things that you are seeing through your lens.
It's a great question, and I guess it'd be remiss if we didn't speak about it. So in markets, we always need to dive into and I guess open our eyes widely where we can see momentum going, i.e. where smart money is essentially funneling their money. And not only since the war broke out, but over the past 12 months, we've seen an increasing amount of money flow into defense. So, I mean, if we just think about what happened since the Gaza attacks really turned up a notch back in early October, we've seen a huge step up in stocks like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and General Electric. And we've also seen potentially M&A whispers picking up in this space. But all in all, the reason behind this is because not only do we have some of these companies that are replenishing US stockpiles, but they're also increasingly sending support to Ukraine. And now there's a lot more, I guess, forward thinking that that there are going to be a lot of orders coming from Israel as well. And so in the last couple of days, we've started to see this materialize with companies like Lockheed Martin seeing a lot of orders come through from Israel. But a lot of these companies as well, we've got to remember, Brian, if we think about Lockheed Martin, I mean, 70% of their revenue, of their ongoing revenue source is tied to the US government. So 70% of the money that comes in the door each quarter, each year is from the US government. So anything that comes on top of that is essentially cream. And so that's why we're seeing Lockheed Martin just in the past week, its shares are up 12%.
Now, Jess, one of the interesting things is, and you're spot on when you said this, there's a heavy reliance, obviously, on people like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin on the US government for the bulk of their sales. But what it also does, the current numbers don't show, is the potential really for that number to shrink and for there to be a greater amount of customers in different parts of the world. Case in point being, of course, the defense contractor or the stock, perhaps, that we want to talk about out of Korea, Hanwha Systems, which basically is something that a regional something in the region that we can basically look at. And also KAI, because Lockheed Martin then is a partner for the Korean FA-50 fighters, which are sold not only in large numbers to Poland, but also to new markets across most of ASEAN's air forces. And Hanwha Systems, which has also sold a lot of defense equipment to Poland.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fundamental to also, geographically look at different defense contractors. But if we can also just pivot back to the US as well. So you spoke about some of the Asian leaders as well. So if we think about Lockheed Martin, for example, they've been serving Australian borders for 70 years. So they're not only supplying radars and aeronautical support, but they're also training our pilots as well and putting the Defence Force through extensive pilot programs. So we're not only thinking about companies that are positioning actually in defence, but also, more importantly, aeronautical support as well. But if we think about another company, if we can, one that's a little bit more diversified, not just in terms of geographics, but in terms of sectors, GE might be one that you might like to think about. So it's globally diversified, sector diversified as well. So it's a healthcare company. They're also in aviation engines. Aviation supplies account for about 35% of the business, but they're also in future-facing energy production as well. So steam, nuclear power, gas, hydro, wind, and that future energy division makes up 60%. But just focusing on the diversification piece, which you rightly touched upon, when a business is diversified, not only across different sectors but geographics, we typically see institutions and banks heavily favour these stocks. And so that's why we're seeing stocks like GE that are tightly held by instos and banks, meaning every quarter they're typically going to be topped up on when we see pullbacks. I mean, stocks that you've mentioned and that I've mentioned today, they're in some of the world's biggest ETFs, like the Defence ETF, ITA, the other defense ETF, PPA, both of these are listed in the US. So we just need to pay attention, I guess, to those in times of geopolitical tension.
And Jess, I can buy these ETFs on Moomoo's app, correct?
You can not only buy them on Moomoo's app, but you can probably buy them anywhere that you can buy or sell US shares. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we can just, I don't know how we're going for time, but
Yep,
if we just speak about GE as well. So GE recently sold about 40 engines to Air Canada for their 787 airline. So when we're talking about forward earnings and the company's share price being valued on future cash flows, that's something to consider. So money is going to continue to come in the door, not just for defense, but also for supplying engines to passenger vehicles as well. But also, again, just think about GE. You're thinking about their collaboration as well with the US Army. So Lockheed Martin, they've got tightly held contracts with the US Army, but so too does GE. So we know GE recently inked a deal to go into business essentially with the US Army to bolster their turbine engine program. So you're talking 50% more engine power and velocity for the Black Hawks, the Apaches, and the future attack reconnaissance aircrafts. So 50% more engine power, reduced cycle life, and these are reasons why these companies such as GE are going to keep getting money in the door from the US government.
And Jess, on a final note there, just to add to what you've just said, GE engines power the FA-50s that are from Korea that are sold to Poland and ASEAN nations. GE engines also power the new generation light fighters for India as well. So there's a really strong forward momentum across the board from a military and civilian market for GE. Thank you. I'm going to do a lot of research on GE. Thanks, Jess, for your insights.
Yeah, and their shares are doing very well too. So lots of people will be looking into them. Thank you so much, Brian.
We've been speaking to Jessica Amir, market strategist at moomoo, coming to us from Sydney on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Please check out the show on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.